It's not fraud if you never move in. That was the sentence, 6 words uttered casually, arrogantly, with the kind of tone only a career politician marinated in immunity could muster. 6 words that, if spoken by a Republican, would have triggered 24-hour CNN coverage, 5 congressional subpoenas, and a Netflix docuseries by Friday. But this wasn't just anyone. This was Letitia James, the self-anointed crusader who once puffed her chest on TV, claiming Trump's financial disclosures were a national threat. And now here she was, captured on tape, brushing off mortgage fraud like it was a parking ticket. Sam Anter didn't need coffee that morning. He had just found the smoking gun. "I'm telling you," Sam muttered as he paced around his cramped office, littered with old printouts, property maps, and a whiteboard stained with names of state officials. This woman didn't just mess up. She lied on a federally regulated mortgage document, signed the damn thing in ink, and now her lawyer's trying to walk it back like it's a typo. He held the document up to the light, his fingers trembling not from nerves but from a deep, righteous anger. On August 17, 2023, Letitia James had certified under oath that she would occupy a home in Virginia as her primary residence, a property located at 604 Sterling Street, 400 miles away from her taxpayer-funded office in Manhattan. "Who the hell leaves New York to be a part-time Virginian?" he grumbled, yanking open a drawer and pulling out a second sheet, this one a letter from her lawyer dated April 2025. "No intention to occupy," he read aloud, shaking his head. Of course. Now she's the victim of her own attorney's clarity. Ain't that rich? He sat down, leaning into his monitor, opening his encrypted archives. Letitia James. Sterling Street Mortgage. 2023, power of attorney signed. Residency declaration confirmed. And now the oops defense. "Sorry, Tish, but mortgage fraud doesn't come with a return policy." The printer hummed as he loaded the documents into a folder. His face was calm, but his eyes burned. This wasn't just about one lie, this was about a pattern. A woman who weaponized the legal system to crush her political enemies and thought no one would notice when she scribbled over her own rules. He pressed the speaker button and recorded a voice memo. "Pam, this one's real." She boxed herself in with her own signature, and her lawyer just sealed the coffin with that letter. "I'm sending you the full packet. You'll want to see this." He hit send, paused, then whispered to no one in particular, this trap wasn't built for her. She walked into it with heels on. And somewhere in the silence of that room, the irony thickened like smoke. Letitia James, queen of legal showdowns, had just handed her adversaries the one thing they never had before, proof, her own, on paper, signed, sealed, and fatally contradicting. And so, with a sealed envelope on its way to Washington and a copy of Letitia's signature smirking from inside the folder, Sam Anter leaned back in his chair with the quiet satisfaction of a man who knew the first domino had just tipped. He hadn't made a scene. He hadn't called a press conference. He didn't need to. Because when Pam Bondi opened that packet, it would speak for itself, and it did. 3 hours later, the door to the deputy director's office at FBI headquarters swung open. Pam Bondi wasn't smiling. "Dan, we've got something." Dan Bonino looked up from the bureau's briefing table, his rolled-up sleeves already stained with paperwork and residual MAGA distrust. His eyes narrowed at the sight of her. "You bring receipts or just fire?" Pam didn't sit. She dropped the folder onto his desk. "Both. It's Letitia." Sam dug up a certified occupancy claim for a property in Virginia. 2 years later, her lawyer says she never meant to live there. "I've got her signature here, and a letter that kills it." Dan opened the folder, scanning the documents in silence. When he reached Lel's letter, he gave a dry laugh. "She perjured herself on a mortgage app." Bondi nodded. "In the house, she co-owns it with her niece." Bonino leaned back, exhaled hard through his nose. "Of course she does. Because it's always family when they hide the cash." He stood, already heading toward the secure access terminal. "You want this buried or burned?" Pam's voice was steady. "Neither. I want it verified, quietly but thoroughly." Dan slid his badge across the scanner. "You'll have it within 20 minutes. He was surrounded by records, disclosures, title searches, bank filings. His team pulled up Letitia James' financial disclosure reports from 2020 through 2024. No sign of 604 sterling. Nothing about occupancy. But that wasn't the shocker. "Hold up," he muttered, pointing to another address. 3121 Perrin Avenue. She claimed 2 mortgages here in 2023 and 2024. His assistant nodded. "Yeah, but," Dan raised a brow. "But what?" She handed him the title search file. "There's only one. From OVM Financial. August 2020. For $19,600. Dan stared at the paper. "And that one? It's not listed anywhere." "Nowhere?" She confirmed. He turned, paced. "So let me get this straight. She tells the state she has 2 mortgages that don't exist, then doesn't tell them about the one that does?" "Correct." He stopped pacing. "You ever watch someone throw a punch and walk into it at the same time?" His team exchanged awkward glances. He didn't wait for a response. She didn't forget. She fabricated. That's the difference. Forgetting is human. Fabricating is calculated. He picked up the phone and called Pam. "We've got bigger problems. This wasn't a mistake. It's a blueprint. The house she certified to live in doesn't show up on any disclosure. The mortgage she actually took out doesn't exist on paper. And the ones she wrote down? They're ghosts." There was a moment of silence before Pam spoke, her tone flat. "So she handed us phantom mortgages." Dan let out a dry chuckle. "Exactly. And you know what they say about ghosts, they haunt you." Pam countered, "No, they disappear. Just like the transparency in her office." Dan paused, his voice dropping. "If Trump got hauled into court over property valuations, what on earth do we call this?" Pam's response was quick and sharp. "We call it the beginning." Dan ended the call, his eyes narrowing as he stared at the files like they might reveal something new. "It's not just hypocrisy," he muttered. "It's a strategy. And it's time we tear it down." That was the spark. When Bonino's team released the full analysis of Letitia's disclosures, or more precisely, what she had failed to disclose, Pam Bondi didn't rush to the media. There was no urgent press conference, no stampede to sympathetic cameras on Capitol Hill. Instead, she opted for something far more calculated: silence. Because in Washington, timing isn't just important, it's everything. And by holding back, she forced her opponents into a guessing game, wondering when the blow would come. That silence echoed louder than any breaking news, which is exactly why, within 3 days, the other side cracked first. Cut to a studio drenched in blue light, where logos spun across giant screens like a televangelist's fever dream. Welcome to Inside the Justice Lens, CNN's primetime firewall. Tonight's guest, Alvin Bragg. Dressed sharply, with a rehearsed smirk, he was ready for the spotlight. The host leaned in with smug sympathy. "Mr. Bragg, there's been buzz, some are even calling it outright accusations, about Attorney General Letitia James and her real estate disclosures. What's your take?" Bragg didn't flinch. He was there to perform. "Let me be clear," he said with smooth assurance, "not living in a house is not a crime. This is a technical issue. It's personal, procedural, not criminal." The host nodded solemnly, as if he'd just received divine wisdom. "So, you don't think there's any comparison to what Trump was accused of?" Bragg offered a polished smile, the kind perfected through media coaching, maybe even with an HBO deal on the horizon. "That comparison? It's political theater. What Letitia James did was hold others accountable. What's happening to her now? It's retaliation, classic projection from the far right." Then came the split screen. On one side, Bragg sat calmly. On the other, footage played of Letitia James stepping from a black SUV, surrounded by aides, sunglasses on, like the lead in a film titled Justice, but make it fashion. The host pressed again, but the documents haven't been shown to be more than incomplete. Bragg cut in. Let's be serious. Disclosure mistakes happen. If that's fraud, then DC would be a ghost town. The screen flashed with quotes from the New York Times. Bondi's offensive against James mirrors James' own actions against Trump, but without the evidence. Political revenge disguised as oversight. Bragg looked toward the camera and adjusted his cufflink like a man delivering the final word. Pam Bondi wants to talk transparency? Where was that outrage when Mar-a-Lago was casually leaking classified intel next to the pool? In her office, Bondi watched in silence, arms folded. Without taking her eyes off the screen, she muttered, "The woman who weaponized paperwork is now hiding behind it." She picked up a pen and began writing. The response she drafted was precise, razor sharp. Before the ink dried, the letter was on the editor's desk at the Times. Letitia James once said that financial omissions weren't just prosecutable, they disqualified someone from public office. She turned clerical errors into felonies, valuations into media scandals. But now that she's in the same position, the press bends over backward to excuse it. Let's be clear, someone who built her name on punishing financial missteps doesn't get to shrug and say oops. As the letter made its rounds, phones lit up in newsrooms across the country. The battle wasn't fought with facts, it was launched with fire. Letitia James, whether she wanted it or not, was on the front page. When Bondi's letter was published, the impact rippled far beyond Manhattan. It wasn't thunderous, but it was surgical. The kind of strike that makes anyone who's danced too close to the line start to wonder just how close the knife is to their throat. CNN buried the story under a panel of legal analysts. MSNBC pivoted to Florida politics. But the people who paid attention didn't need cable news to smell something foul. And the person who understood that best? Letitia James. Because when the media tries to shield you but the facts stay firm, there's only one card left to play: control the optics. And that's exactly what she did. She hosted a high-profile fundraiser. The banners read, "Defend Justice. Empower Equity." The room was filled with progressive donors, civil rights attorneys, and half of New York's activist elite. Cameras rolled. Microphones were live. Letitia James took the stage with the confidence of a prosecutor, not someone under scrutiny. "Let me say this once and for all," she declared, her voice cutting through the murmurs like a verdict. "I never lived in that Virginia home. I never planned to. It was a technical requirement, not an indication of intent." The audience responded with applause, some enthusiastic, others uncertain. Then she delivered the real hit. "If we start turning every checkbox on a mortgage form into a crime, we don't have a justice system, we have a bureaucracy chasing ghosts. You want to talk fraud? How about disguising a golf course as a tax shelter? Or claiming that skyscrapers are worth less than your dog walker's apartment?" She smiled, and then, as if her ego needed one more note, she added, "It's not fraud if you never move in." The room fell into silence, not from shock, but from sheer disbelief. In one sentence, she admitted she never intended to occupy the house and mocked the very legal definition of the offense she once threw at Trump. And within minutes, the video clip went viral. Somewhere, Sam Anter, surrounded by his archive of legal chaos and digital records, froze the frame right at that moment. He didn't add commentary, he didn't need to. He simply posted it with the caption, "Letitia James 2023, financial misrepresentation must be punished regardless of intent. Letitia James 2025, it's not fraud if you never move in." Which version should the court believe? Fox lit up like a bonfire. Dan Bongino went on air that night with a grin so sharp it could slice subpoenas. "You're telling me the woman who ran half her political career on the idea that no one is above the law just stood in front of a velvet curtain, wearing a tailored pantsuit, and said mortgage fraud is a formality if you don't unpack your boxes? Are you kidding me?" He leaned forward, the camera tight on his face. "You think Trump got a free pass for misvaluing a building number? He got raided, he got gagged, he got dragged, and now this woman thinks intent is optional?" He held up a file. Letitia James didn't just cross a line, she set it on fire, danced around the ashes, and charged taxpayers for the lighter fluid. And somewhere in D.C., Pam Bondi folded her arms and whispered to herself what the rest of the country was beginning to think: she's not making mistakes anymore. She's making a case study. The countdown had begun, and Letitia James had just signed the warrant for her own political self-destruction. Lev was on stage in high definition when the footage hit 3 million views in under 24 hours. Pam Bondi didn't celebrate. She didn't blink. She simply printed the transcript, clipped the title "It's Not Fraud If You Never Move In," and slid it into a folder already bursting with contradictions, disclosures, and that deadly letter from Lel. By noon the next day, she stood before the Oversight Committee with a voice as composed as a sniper's breath. "This isn't about partisan drama," she told the chamber. "This is about a public official under oath who fabricated information for financial gain, then laughed about it live on stage in front of donors." She paused, letting the silence do its work. "I hereby request a formal congressional hearing. I move to summon Letitia James, Deputy AG Lel, and all involved entities in the approval and management of her financial disclosures, including relevant documentation from OVM Financial." She let the file hit the desk with a thud, a simple sound, but it echoed like a gavel. 2 hours later, a vote passed by a razor-slicing margin. The House clerk stood and read the official notice: "By order of this committee and with majority consent, an investigative hearing into the financial and ethical conduct of New York Attorney General Letitia James shall be convened under federal oversight. Witnesses are to appear under subpoena." Pam turned, no smile, just purpose. The gloves were off. The chamber was thick with silence, the kind of silence that doesn't settle but hovers like static before a lightning strike. Cameras locked in. Every network was live. Reporters barely blinked. This wasn't just another hearing, it was the reckoning of a woman who had once treated the law like a crowbar, useful for prying open opponents' reputations and wedging herself into headlines. Pam Bondi stood calm as stone, voice level but cold enough to crack glass. "Let the record show," she began, "that today's proceedings are not about political optics nor partisan revenge. This is about a public servant sworn to uphold the law, who chose to bend it for personal gain. We are not here to question Letitia James as a citizen. We are here to question her as a sitting attorney general who once made mortgage declarations punishable by felony." She paused, let it breathe. Today, she stands where others once stood, accused not by ideology, but by her own signature. Letitia didn't flinch. Her lips curled slightly, a smirk in slow motion. She leaned forward toward the mic, her voice polished, theatrical, and laced with indignation. "I'm not here to play the scapegoat in some far-right fantasy," she said, eyes scanning the crowd. "I'm here because a handful of partisan operatives want to punish me for holding a man accountable who thought the Constitution ended at his property line." She jabbed a finger in the air, not at anyone in particular, but at the specter of the administration. "Let's not pretend this is about paperwork. This is about power. I prosecuted Trump, and now his allies want my head on a pike. They call it justice. I call it revenge with better PR." Gasps murmured through the back benches, but Pam didn't move. She didn't need to, because in this room, she wasn't looking for applause. She was looking for contradictions. James Comer, chair of the committee, simply nodded, neither moved nor impressed. "Thank you, Miss James," he said with dry formality. "Now let's get back to facts. We'll begin with property number 1604, Sterling Street." The screen lit up. The hearing had officially begun, and so had the unraveling. The air inside the chamber had shifted. Gone was the political theater of opening statements. What settled now was something colder, meaner, like the beginning of a duel where both shooters already knew their target, and the only question left was who would flinch first. Pam Bondi stepped forward, her stiletto silent against the marble floor. In her hand, a single document, worn at the corners from the number of times it had passed through evidence gloves. "Exhibit A," she said, holding it up for the room. "Mortgage application dated August 17, 2023, signed by the Attorney General of New York, certifying under penalty of perjury that she intended to reside at 604 Sterling Street, Norfolk, Virginia. She let the words hang, signed, sworn, notarized. She turned to the screen behind her. With a click, the monitor flashed to a scanned image of the document, Letitia's signature stark and unmistakable, Letitia and James, black ink, right below the sentence, "I certify this property will be my primary residence." Then Pam reached for a second page, and here she paused, more deliberate now. A letter addressed to her office, dated April 4, 2025, authored by Letitia's own attorney, David Lell. She didn't bother to soften the blow. She read it aloud, each word clipped like a verdict. Miss James is a non-occupying co-borrower. She never lived at the property. Never planned to. The room held its breath. Silence, sharp and surgical. Pam's voice dropped, barely above a whisper. "So which is it, Madam Attorney General? Did you lie to the bank, or did you lie to Congress? Because today, you can't blame this on paperwork. One of these documents is a felony. The other? Obstruction." Letitia's jaw clenched. She leaned forward, gripping the microphone like she wanted to crush it. "That letter wasn't my creation. I didn't draft it. I didn't sign off on it. My attorney interpreted a complex transaction." "Stop right there," Pam cut in, calm and firm. "Did he lie?" Letitia's mouth opened, then shut. Pam stepped in closer. "Simple yes or no, Madam Attorney General. Did your lawyer submit a false document to my office?" Letitia bristled. Her tone turned defensive. "I won't play word games in a witch hunt. That document reflected the technical requirements of the lender. The letter explained my actual living situation. Paperwork evolves. That's not a crime." Pam arched a brow, half amused. "Evolves. That's the new word for perjury?" Letitia slammed her palm on the table. "I paid that mortgage. I fulfilled my obligations. There was no intent to deceive." Pam didn't blink. "No, what you did was maintain a performance. You figured as long as the money kept moving, the lies didn't matter. But intent is everything. You didn't just hide behind your lawyer, you used him like a shield." Letitia shot back, "You think this is about intent? This is about Trump. About me holding him accountable while your party stood by and cheered him on." Pam's voice turned cold, nearly silent. "You used the law like a blade. Now that blade's pointing at you. And instead of answering a single question, you deflect, accuse, and stall." Letitia sneered, "You don't want justice. You want payback." Pam gave a faint smile. "No. We want fairness. And for the first time in your career, the rules are finally catching up to you." Letitia stared forward, breathing shallow. She opened her mouth, but nothing came. For once, the room was silent. Dan Bongino didn't walk to the podium. He moved with purpose, like a man ready to pull a reputation down brick by brick. Holding a folder like a weapon, he spoke in that unmistakable Queen's rasp. "Let's look at the house at 3121 Pyron Avenue in Norfolk, Virginia. Purchased in August 2020. A $19,600 mortgage from OVM Financial." He dropped the folder on the table. "This mortgage is real. It's been public since she signed it." Turning to Letitia, his voice cut like a blade. "But from 2020 to 2024, not once did she list this mortgage on her official disclosures. Not once. Instead, she listed two others, neither of which shows up in any search. No records. No loans. Just fiction on a form." Letitia crossed her legs, calm, as if ready for the cameras. "That's a clerical error. I've already said we're correcting the documents. These filings are hundreds of pages long. Mistakes happen." Dan gave a dry laugh. "Hundreds of pages? If you can remember every cocktail party from Diversity Week, you can remember the house you borrowed 20 grand for." Letitia kept her smile polite. Mr. Bongino, you may not grasp the complexity of asset disclosures. It's not simple. My office manages many properties, trusts, shared holdings. Omission is not deception. Dan cocked his head. Complex? This wasn't a shell company. This was a house with your name on it. Still is. Still active. Still missing from your reports. He stepped forward. You didn't forget. You hid it. You listed 2 imaginary loans to cover the one you didn't want to explain. That's not complexity, it's choreography. Letitia's eyes narrowed. I wasn't the sole borrower. That mortgage was shared. Discretion applies to these forms, and I exercised that legally. Dan raised the deed and shook it. Discretion? If your name's on the loan and you don't live there, you disclose it. You made that rule. Remember dragging Trump through 10 years of books over a misfiled loan and a company buried 3 layers deep? Letitia's jaw locked. Her voice dropped. I am not Donald Trump. Dan smirked. You're right. He earned his money before taking office. The room froze. Letitia leaned forward, voice like venom. This is a charade. A partisan circus meant to destroy a woman who dared to take on the most corrupt president in American history. Dan didn't flinch. Then answer this, how does it feel to be caught doing the very thing you built your reputation punishing others for? He pointed at the mortgage. That's real. The ones you reported? Invented. You didn't forget. You created a lie to bury the truth. Silence followed. Dan stepped back. The weight of the facts was louder than anything else. Then the screen lit up. Pam didn't say a word. She just pressed play. The video started mid-sentence, Letitia James at a fundraiser 3 days ago, framed by banners that read, Defend Justice. She spoke with confidence, it was just a mistake. I never intended to live there. It was a formality. Whispers echoed. Pam stood still. Then came the line that would stick like a scar, it's not fraud if you never move in. The room didn't gasp, it recognized. Everyone silently thought, she really said that. Stillness. Not from shock, but realization. James calmly leaned forward, fingers steepled, eyes locked on Letitia like a surgeon about to cut. Pam Bondi stepped closer, not dramatic, just surgical. Madam Attorney General, she said, when you indicted Donald Trump, you said, no one is above the law, especially those sworn to uphold it. She turned to Letitia, eyes ice cold. So let me ask, if lying on a mortgage application isn't fraud, what is? If this is a formality, who exactly are our laws written for? Letitia opened her mouth, the fire gone. No words. Pam didn't wait. Because when a regular person checks the wrong box, they lose their home. When a business owner misreports income, they get raided. But when you do it, it's a clerical error. Letitia finally spoke, voice trembling. I didn't mean it like that. Pam tilted her head. You didn't mean to say it, or didn't mean to get caught. Letitia's voice cracked. It was a donor event. I wasn't speaking legally. Pam didn't flinch. No. It was a confession. With canapes. Turning to the committee, we have her signed statement. Her lawyer's letter. A concealed mortgage. And now, a public admission that her original statement was, in her own words, just a formality. James calmly leaned back, glasses adjusted, staring at Letitia like a judge weighing the noose. In that moment, the woman who once was the law in New York looked impossibly small. He stood, voice heavy and final. This committee finds sufficient grounds to refer Attorney General Letitia and James for criminal investigation under Title 18, U.S. Code, Sections 1014 and 871, pertaining to false statements and abuse of office. We refer this matter to the Department of Justice for immediate review. Gasps echoed. Reporters froze mid-scribble. Letitia James sat motionless, eyes locked on the desk. Not angry. Not proud. Just still. As if realizing that the storm wasn't symbolic, it was here. Dan Bongino didn't gloat. Didn't look up. He whispered, glancing at the open folder, "Fraud doesn't need a weapon. Just a lie, signed at the right time." Pam Bondi stepped forward. No notes. Just experience. She faced Letitia, clear, calm, final. "You built your name dragging men into court for less than what you just confessed to, on video. You turned loopholes into convictions. So what happens when the one writing the rules breaks them?" Letitia stayed silent. Pam didn't need an answer. "The same law you once used like a sword hasn't changed. But now, it's pointed at you." Letitia looked up. Eyes glassy. Lips parted. Nothing left to say. Not because there were no words, but because none of them could survive the truth. A Capitol officer stepped quietly to the side of the chamber. Routine. Silent. Pam gave one last look, not gloating. Just steady. History won't remember your title. It'll remember that, for once, the law finally remembered your name. The room was still. This time, justice had come for the one who thought she stood above it.